live at the courthouse in Norfolk. We've been waiting to talk to her. She's given us more of her time as she prepares all of her stories to come later on today. Madison, we've got a sentencing ruling. What can you tell us about the judge's decision for 44 years here?
Yeah, the judge's ruling in this case came very quickly. Again, we recessed right before 11 and we braked for about an hour and a half and came back into the courtroom at around 12:30. We waited a couple more minutes for the judge, and by 12:50, by 12:45, we had an answer today of what Jermiah Copeland was going to be sentenced with. Now, amongst all the charges, each of the charges and specifications had a different kind of maximum penalty or maximum sentence to serve connected to those cases. In all, against all of those specifications and charges, we have learned that Jermiah Copeland is going to be sentenced to 528 months. Now, you do the math here, that boils down to 44 years serving in a federal prison in Kansas. Now, we did learn all of that information from inside the courtroom. We also did learn that he's going to have a 365-day credit that's going to be applied to that 44-year sentence based on the time that he has already served. Now, Connor, if you remember, back on Friday, there was a pretrial hearing that talked about Copeland's pretrial confinement and about how he's been in maximum custody for now marks 366 days. And they were trying to get part of that pre-confinement and maximum custody stipulation there. They were trying to get him credit towards his sentence. Now, the judge also ruled on that motion as well. The judge denied that motion. So the only credit that Jermiah Copeland will be getting towards his 44-year sentence that was handed down just moments ago by the judge is going to be that 365 days that he's already served in maximum confinement. Now, we have heard from a slew of different people connected to this case just moments after court let out. We heard from Esmeralda Castle, Angelina's mother. We heard from Marshall Griffin, the attorney for the Resendiz family. We also heard from Denitza James. She's a representative for the League of United Latin American Citizens, all hosting a press gaggle after court today. Esmeralda getting emotional, speaking about what it meant to her to hear not only what happened to Angelina, not only to hear a sentence, but to hear the words of love and embracing from Jermiah Copeland's family. Now, today in court, we did hear from Jermiah Copeland's mother and his grandmother. We also heard from Jermiah Copeland himself. He read a full statement to the entirety of the courtroom. Part of that statement, while he was standing and giving that statement, but part of that statement, he turned in the courtroom and looked directly at Angelina Resendiz's mother, Esmeralda, and acknowledged the fact that he took Angelina's life and that nothing that he can ever say or do can take that back. But what will live with him is now the actions that he needs to take to move forward. He said that he hopes to become a changed man. We did learn that Jermiah Copeland has a son too. We learned that in his statement, he said that he is now going to be living the rest of his life in order to do right by his son. So again, just an emotional day all over in court today, from emotional testimony from Jermiah's mother, from Copeland's grandmother, and from Copeland himself. Not to mention, I'd be remiss to mention the closing arguments that did happen today and the summaries of each argument from both the prosecution and the defense today. The prosecution started their closing arguments by bringing forward that duffel bag that Angelina Resendiz was found inside of in the Broad Creek area of Norfolk, just miles away from where we are standing right now. That black duffel bag serving as a multitude of different symbols inside of the courtroom today. For the prosecution, it was the symbol of this story and the symbol that this duffel bag was once filled with Navy uniforms and the promise of what Copeland could do in the Navy. Then telling the story of what happened that night on May 29th, that early morning on May 29th when Angelina Resendiz was killed, leading up to that black duffel bag being found in that wooded area near Broad Creek. So again, hearing that, seeing that bag first, that. I can speak for myself here, and I can speak for the other media representatives who were in the room. We all looked at each other when we saw that bag being lifted up, because we just knew the weight that it carried. And after court let out and we had that press gaggle and we spoke to Angelina Resendiz's mother, Esmeralda, I asked her, I said, seeing that bag in the room today, what was going through your head? And I think what was really striking about that was that we learned that Angelina Resendiz was issued that same bag, that Angelina Resendiz had that same duffel bag, and that duffel bag that Angelina owned is now sitting in Esmeralda Castle's home. So she saw that black duffel bag that her daughter was found inside of the courtroom today. But when she goes home back to Texas, she's going to look at that duffel bag and it's going to have a different kind of meaning and a different kind of sentiment to it. But I think one of the most moving parts about this entire case, and what attorney for the family, Marshall Griffin, also echoed in his statements post-court, is that watching Copeland's family address Esmeralda Castle and Angelina Resendiz's family is something that Marshall Griffin, the attorney here for the family, says that he's never seen happen in a case before, like how he's seen it in the depth that's happened here and today inside of court. Now, Griffin is typically a defense attorney, so typically he serves people who are accused. And when he has seen multiple of these court proceedings play out over the span of his life, he's worked with many of the people that were inside the room today and years prior before this case here. But what he said was, watching Jermiah Copeland's grandma stand up in front of the entire courtroom and say, me and my family all last night sat down and we were talking about you, Esmeralda, and we were sharing in Angie's memory. And even though your daughter is gone, we grieve her. And pardon me as I get a little choked up here, because it's the type of gravitas that you can't truly understand unless you are in the room. And to see Jermiah Copeland's family say, we are also grieving your daughter, is something that will touch you. And for Angelina Resendiz's mother to stand up and say that she forgives Jermiah Copeland after all of this, to accept his formal apology that he gave in court today, it gives you chills, and it shows that he is trying to move forward to be in a place of taking accountability for his actions. His grandmother and his mother both said on the stand today that he grew up knowing about accountability. He knew what accountability was, and they stood by, even though they're standing by him and supporting him during this case, they said out loud, we cannot condone his actions. What happened was not okay. This was a terrible tragedy. But at the end of Jermiah Copeland's grandmother's statement, she said, I hope that me and Jermiah Copeland's mother, as well as Esmeralda Castle, can come together on this and share in the impact of what this case has had, not just on Esmeralda's family, but also on Copeland's family as well, as they all now mutually grieve together. That was the emotional day that we had in court today. If we want to look forward to what happens now, Esmeralda Castle and LULAC are still depending on that independent investigation that they have been begging the Navy for into this case and into the Navy's procedures of what happens when a soldier, or a sailor goes missing. So again, we've seen what Esmeralda Castle says is a sense of justice today. We've seen emotional statements from Copeland and his family, and we've also seen that this push for accountability isn't going to end, even though that sentence has now been issued. Connor.
Okay, Madison Schlegel giving us such a genuine sense of what it was like in that courtroom, what it's been like for these families going through this process. And again, really emphasizing how there have been some largely unprecedented things going on out there this week, especially when it comes to the interactions between the Copeland family and Esmeralda Castle. Madison, I can't tell you how much we appreciate the time. Tremendous insight, a bevy of information, and a real sense of the depth of emotion involved here. We will see Madison Schlegel on 13 News Now. For Madison, thank you again for joining us here on Live Impact News. We'll see you later on in the day.
Thanks, Connor. We appreciate it.
And again, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, Madison Schlegel with more reporting on this case. And what a genuine just understanding we got from that report of what it was like in that courtroom, the depth of emotion involved in a case like this as two families grapple with a genuine tragedy. And Esmeralda Castle has been open about pursuing forgiveness in this situation, and her openness to speak to not only Jermiah Copeland's family, but Jermiah Copeland himself has been something to behold. And now, as Madison said, she pushes forward, hoping for new laws that will create accountability within the Navy and the armed forces in situations like this.